Hello, today I'm going to rank every single Rush studio album. I'm not going to do any live albums, and I'm not going to be including feedback. Their 2004 studio album that was all cover versions, so just our 19 studio albums that are all original material. This will be maybe quite long, so I've got 19 albums to go through, so I'm not going to do a big long intro. I'm just going to get straight into it. Just want to say again, this is, as always, my opinion. Strictly my opinion, obviously you're entitled to yours. Plus, just want to say that the reason I'm doing this is because I did the King Crimson one last week, and that was pretty fun. I quite enjoyed that. I will probably do another one at some point, but I don't want to do loads of these in a row. I just sort of thought that was fun, so I thought I'd do another one this week. So anyway, without any further ado, number 19, Rush, their very, very first album. I'm not going to be. I've got some Rush albums on vinyl, but I'm not going to be lifting them up. I'm just going to be holding all the CDs. This is Rush's first ever album, released in 1974. And the reason I think it's their worst is because it's the only album that doesn't sound like Rush. John Rutsey, was the drummer at the time, not Neil Peart. Neil Peart joined for their second album, right up to their most recent. So those three guys, Alex Lifeson, Geddy Lee, and Neil Peart, are Rush. So having anyone else just doesn't feel right, you know. Also, the lyrics are quite generic. They're kind of love songs, you know. They're not philosophical or, you know, deep and meaningful the way Neil Peart's lyrics tend to be. Also, the music isn't very progressive. I'd say it's the only Rush album that isn't prog, to be honest. This was actually mistaken by a lot of people for a Led Zeppelin album when it came out. People heard songs on the radio of it, and they thought Led Zeppelin were releasing a new album. And I've heard people say that as a compliment to the album. People saying, "Oh, Led Zeppelin are really good." I'm personally not a big fan of Led Zeppelin, but people say, "Well, you know, they were really popular. This band releases an album, some songs, and people mistake it for Led Zeppelin. Isn't that a really good thing?" I personally think that's a bad thing. I think Rush, Rush are a very experimental, very unique band, and for some, I would never mistake them for another band. So for someone to mistake them for a different band sort of shows that the album doesn't have its own personality. But like Rush haven't really got their own character in this album. It is a kind of a wannabe Led Zeppelin album. It wasn't until their second album, Fly By Night, where they really actually found their own personality. So to me, it's their worst because it's just not really a Rush album. Working Man is a very, very good song. There's brilliant songs on every Rush album, and this is no exception. I just personally think it's just not my kind of music, you know. Number 18, Hold Your Fire from 1987. This is a lot of people agree this is one of their weakest. This came out right in between two periods. It was between their alternative era in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and in between their sort of synth rock sort of stuff of the 80s. This album was a step too far in terms of their synthy stuff. It's barely even a rock album. It's very soft rock, if you could even call it that. And luckily, Alex Lifeson, at the time, after this album was released, basically demanded that the next album have a lot more guitar, and thank God he did, because Rush were heading in a bad direction with this album. It does have good songs on it. Force 10's good, Time Stands Still, Lock and Key's good, Mission's good. I even think Tai Shan isn't bad, which is, I think, Geddy Lee's least favourite Rush song ever. But it's not a brilliant album. It is a Rush album. Unlike their first album, it does sound like Rush, but it was too much of a step too far into this sort of synthy, soft sort of era, and it's really good that Alex Lifeson sort of demanded more guitar on the next album, because they were going way too far into this soft rock sort of thing, and that's just not what Rush are really about. I think the album before it, Power Windows, and the album after it, Presto, are both really, really good, because Power Windows is very synth rock and Presto is very alternative. They're both very good for what they are, but they went a step too far with Hold Your Fire. Okay, number 17, Fly By Night. Now we're pretty much from here on, all the albums are really good. Those two albums are the only ones I wouldn't say aren't really good. Uh, all the 17 other ones I'd say are really good, so I'm not saying just because it's 17th that it's bad or anything. Um, Fly By Night does have some really, really good songs on it, like Anthem, Beneath, Between and Behind, even though that's not a lot of people don't really talk about that one. In the End's a really good one. Making Memories is my personal favourite on the album, and then there's the title track Fly By Night and By Turn Snow Dog's good. I just think since it was their first album as the trio that we all know and love, it was their second album ever. It was their first with Neil Peart. It took them a little while to sort of get going with their sort of sound and to gel as a trio, and this was their first album as that trio. And you know, it took an album or two to sort of get going, I'd say. There are some really good songs on it, but I wouldn't say there's that many brilliant ones. You know, it is a good album. It flows very well as an album. It's just, and it's got a really cool album cover. I think it's one of Rush's best album covers. You know, you can barely see it, to be honest, with this light. Anyone who's watching, let me know what you think. Should I maybe turn the camera somewhere, because I've got the light here and this sort of shines on my face like that, you know, the CD box. I should maybe move somewhere else, actually. I think after this video I'm going to move somewhere else in my room. Anyway, Fly By Night is it's a good album, but it was sort of a bumpy start, I'd say, in some ways. There's some really good songs on it, but there are other ones that aren't particularly brilliant. Number 16, Vapor Trails from 2002. This one is another one that I think has really, really brilliant songs on it, but there's some that aren't brilliant either. I think brilliant ones include Ghost Rider, Peaceable Kingdom, Secret Touch, but there's some like Earth Sign, Sweet Miracle that are just sort of good but not brilliant, you know. So I'm not saying the album's mediocre, but it was a bit of, I'd say it's a slight bit of an awkward period. It was right after their hiatus, after Neil Peart's life tragedies, and it was sort of letting go of the alternative thing that they did in the 90s, and sort of leaning towards the more progressive metal stuff that they did with Snakes and Arrows and Clockwork Angels. So I'd say it's in between somewhere. There's some really interesting sounds on it, like Alex Lifeson's guitar has some quite unique sounds that you only hear on this album. And like the songs I named, they're all very good. I wouldn't really listen to it from start to finish very often. You know, it's one of those albums, but all around it is very good. What are we at? 15, 17, 18, 19, 16. Yeah, 15. Test for Echo. Rush's the album previous to Vapor Trails. This was Rush's last album of the 1990s, released in 1996, the year I was born. This is one that also has brilliant songs on it, but it's ruined by a couple of really not great ones, like Virtuality and Dog Ears are two of Rush's, probably two of their weakest songs ever. But there's some fantastic ones on here, like Resist, Limbo, Totem. I like The Colour Right, I like Half the World, the title track's good, Driven's good. So all around it is a very good album, but I'd say it's the weakest of their albums in the 90s, and a lot of people really, really hate this album, and I think that's really unfair. I don't think it deserves the hate it gets. It is very, very good at times, but it is ruined by a couple of pretty weak songs. Well, I wouldn't say ruined, but again, I'd definitely skip those ones, you know. In terms of a straight listen, I'd definitely skip a couple. Okay, number 14. This is going to annoy a lot of die-hard Rush fans if people are watching. 2112 at number 14. Most people would put this in Rush's top 3. I just personally don't think it's anywhere near as good as everybody says it is. In terms of the 2112 suite, I think The Fountain of Lamneth and Cygnus X1 Book 2 are much better songs. I don't see how it's a concept album either. It's classed as a concept album, but I really don't see how it's a concept album. I think the 20-minute suite really has nothing to do with what's on the second side. To me, that's not a concept album. For me, the best song on the second side is The Twilight Zone. That one's good. Lessons is good. A Passage to Bangkok's okay, and I'd say the last two are pretty weak. Something for Nothing and Tears are, I'd say, pretty weak songs. I just think the 2112 suite, I don't think it's as interesting as the other two really long songs that I mentioned. I think some of the parts of the suite sort of have bumpy starts. A lot of them kind of sound similar. I think Cygnus X1 Book 2 is far more interesting, it's far more complex, and I think The Fountain of Lamneth is much more beautiful. I think it's more heartfelt and it has more of an emotional feel to it. So all around, I used to really love 2112, the song, I mean, but it's never been one of my absolute favourite albums. It is good though, I'm not saying it isn't, but I just don't think it's as good as everybody says it is. Okay, number 13, Presto, Rush's first album of their alternative era, released in 1989. This was the album that I mentioned earlier after Hold Your Fire, where Alex Lifeson demanded that the next album have more guitar, and it really shows here. You've got some really kind of heavy alternative riffs. You know, grunge was popular at the time in the late 80s, early 90s, so Alex Lifeson obviously got some inspiration from that and brought in some of the more heavy riffs. It's not a grunge album, it's an alternative album, but you can see it's inspired by that stuff. Show Don't Tell is a really good song. The Pass is one of Rush's best, I'd say. Scars has one of Geddy Lee's most epic bass lines. It's so cool. Hand Over Fist is really good. I really like the lyrics. Presto, the title track, is really beautiful, I'd say. I'd say it's a really good album, and it's got that, you know, that forceful Rush feel that Power Windows had the 2 albums before it that was just missing on Hold Your Fire. Rush are a band that are really, you know, they have really strong music, if you know what I mean. It's really forceful, if that makes sense. And Hold Your Fire is really the only album that just doesn't have that. It's way too soft. Rush are not a soft band, and thank God Alex Lifeson demanded more guitar on the next album, because it really paid off. This is a very good album. Okay, number 12, Grace Under Pressure, released in 1984. This album grew on me over time. The first time I listened to it, I really didn't like it. In fact, for a while I didn't like it, and I think a lot of Rush fans are sort of on the same page as me. It takes a while for this album to absorb how good it is. I'd say Between the Wheels used to be my least favourite song on the album. Now it's one of my all-time favourite Rush tracks. I think the lyrics are so powerful and emotional. I love that sort of dark, sort of heavy keyboard. And I'd say this is one of 2 Rush albums I would actually consider dark. Rush's music tends to be quite uplifting and quite positive. Well, it's always positive, but I'd say this and Snakes and Arrows are the only 2 albums that I consider dark. So it's unique, especially since it came right after Signals. I just wasn't expecting an album this dark. Signals is, you know, it's very upbeat, very uplifting, and then I listened to this and it's so dark and so pessimistic at times. But there's some of the absolute best Rush songs ever. Like I said, Between the Wheels, The Enemy Within is very good. Kid Gloves, it sounds a bit punky, but it sort of grows on you. After Image is very good. I think Distant Early Warning, but I used to really like, but I don't like that quite as much as I used to. And it has one of the worst music videos ever. But all around, Grace Under Pressure is a fantastic album that takes a while to grow on you, I'd say. But once it does, it really pays off. Okay, what are we at now? Number 11? Roll the Bones from 1991. First album of the 90s, right after Presto from 1989. It's got some of that sort of stereotypical sort of early 90s sort of stuff going on, sort of alternative sort of beats. There's even a bit of rap in there, which I think was mainly just satire. But there's some of that sort of 90s keyboard, you know, if that makes sense. It's kind of a bit difficult to describe. But there's also some really good like riffs. Where's My Thing is a fantastic instrumental. Dreamline's a great song to start the album. Roll the Bones, the title track's very good. But my personal favourite, I'd say, is Ghost of a Chance. I think the lyrics are tremendous. It just has that sort of beautiful sort of early 90s sort of thing. You know, like Tunnel of Love by Bruce Springsteen. I know it came out in the late 80s, but if you've heard the Human Touch album, was that the name of the album? Yeah, you know Human Touch? I think that came out in 92. It's kind of like that. The early 90s sort of classic rock bands or artists, sort of like Bruce Springsteen and Rush, they had that sort of melodic, sort of beautiful sort of guitar sounds, and it's very, very present here at times. That's sort of the best way I can describe it. But this is another album that took a while to grow on me. The first time I listened to it, I didn't like it at all. But now I'd say Ghost of a Chance is one of the absolute best Rush songs, and You Bet Your Life's a good one as well. A lot of people don't like that song. I think it's a very good album, pretty much from start to finish. I wouldn't say there's really any song on it that isn't great, apart from maybe Face Up. I'd say Face Up's the only weak one, but apart from that, I'd say pretty much every song on it's good. Okay, we're in the top 10 now. Number 10, Power Windows from 1985. This was probably the most stereotypically 80s synth Rush album that you could think of. It's very mid 80s when you listen to it. It's loads of this album is absolutely saturated in keyboards and synth. The guitar really takes a step back, but there are also some of the absolute best bass lines, like Marathon. The bass lines during the verses are absolutely out of this world. The album starts off super strong with 2 tracks, The Big Money and Grand Designs. I'd say are two of Rush's best. It's also, though it does have some 80s sort of pop sounds in it, a lot of the album is very complex. I think there's also some really emotional songs like Emotion Detector and Mystic Rhythms. I'd say it's one of Rush's best albums because it didn't take that step too far like Hold Your Fire did. It was exactly what it should have been for the time it came out. Hold Your Fire just took a step too far. But I sort of like that the album is a bit more optimistic in comparison to Grace Under Pressure, which came out the year earlier. It is very synthy, but not overly synthy, I'd say. It's very saturated in synth, but it's not in a bad way. Hold Your Fire takes it a bit too far, like I said. All round, it's a really good album. Number 9, Counterparts. This one, I remember the first time I ever listened to it, and I wasn't expecting it to be so heavy. It's a very, at times, very heavy album. You get songs like Stick It Out, which is my personal favourite on the album, which is heavy metal. It's a flat out heavy metal song. Animate, the drum sounds are really heavy on that. Nobody's Hero is a really, really beautiful one. The Speed of Love also kind of slows it down. It has a bit more of a roll the bones sort of sound to it. And Leave That Thing Alone is one of the best instrumentals ever, especially the Time Machine live version. It's much better than the studio version because it has that amazing bass solo at the end, which unfortunately the studio version doesn't have. It's sort of like, I'd say Counterparts was the album that came out after Roll the Bones. I'd describe it as sort of like Roll the Bones with steroids in a way. It's sort of like they took Roll the Bones but they just amped everything up, and it's just better. I'd say it's just a better album. Their best album of the 90s, definitely. Okay, number 8, Snakes and Arrows. This, again, was another one from 2007. This was another album that took a while to grow on me. I remember the first time I listened to it, the only song I liked was Far Cry. Now I can name loads of songs on it that are really good. I'd say it's actually really good from start to finish. I think a lot of Rush fans don't like it. It's because it's dark. It's a very dark album. It's their darkest album ever, I'd say. Which one is it? Spindrift. Spindrift is like King Crimson dark, which is you sort of forget it's Rush at times throughout this album because of how dark it is. Though it never loses that positivity. You know, it's reminding you of that there's always a silver lining. You know, songs like Bravest Face is my personal favourite on the album. I think the lyrics are absolutely beautiful. It's such a powerful song. Malignant Narcissism is a fantastic instrumental. The Larger Bowl, I like how political it is. It's a very beautiful song. The Main Monkey Business is also a really good instrumental, pretty complex. So the album has a lot of mixed sounds. It works a lot better than Vapor Trails. It's much better than Vapor Trails. I really like the progressive metal sound that it has, and a lot of the songs sound very different. On Vapor Trails, a lot of the songs sort of blended together a little bit. This one works a lot better. Songs have much more of a distinctive sound. Songs like Armour and Sword, very heavy. It's sort of, I don't really know why, but I don't know why Rush decided to go for a progressive metal sort of thing that late in their career, but I'm really glad they did. It sort of harkens back to their early days when they were really heavy. Songs like, albums like 2112 and Farewell to Kings, when like the really heavy parts of those albums, it sort of reminds me of that. But it's a really, really, really good album, and it's another one that I think a lot of Rush fans sort of underestimate. Sorry. What are we at? Number 7, Clockwork Angels. Clockwork Angels to me is an absolute masterpiece. From here on in, these last 7 are absolute masterpieces. Every single one of them, I'd say. Though a band can only really have one masterpiece, but you know what I mean. Clockwork Angels, I can't believe how good it is. It's like 40 years into their career, their 19th album, and I'd say it's their best album since 1982. Seriously. You will notice that every album between this and Signals has already been on the list, so that should tell you something. I think Clockwork Angels is their best album in 30 years, genuinely. It's not only that, it's one of the best albums I've ever heard, and I can't believe a band that late into their career could release such a masterpiece. It's even better than Snakes and Arrows by quite a bit. I love Snakes and Arrows, but I'd say that the quality difference is quite big. That's why I'd say from here on in it's all masterpieces, when those other ones were very good albums, but not quite on that level. You've got some of the Rush's absolute best songs, like Clockwork Angels, The Anarchist, which I have the tattoo of here. Seven Cities of Gold has such a great bass line, and The Anarchist as well, one of the Geddy Lee's best bass lines ever. Headlong Flight is so heavy, and I love that they were like 60 when they did this album, and how heavy some of it is. The Garden has that absolutely beautiful guitar solo. It's one of the best albums ever, I'd say, and I couldn't believe it when I first listened to it. Like, though it did take a wee while to sort of for me to truly appreciate it. The first time I listened to it, I didn't quite appreciate how good it really was, but now it's my all-time 7th favourite Rush album out of 19, and I seriously, when I listen to it, I still can't believe it sometimes, how good it is. Anyway, number 6. This is in the more familiar territory now, the ones you usually see in top 5s and that. Signals, 1982. Again, this is another one I can remember the first time I listened to it. It was a really sunny day, and I was just listening to it, and the whole thing was brilliant, right from start to finish. It's such a good album. The album starts brilliantly with subdivisions and doesn't dip in quality at all until Countdown, the last song. Every song on it is absolutely tremendous. I'd say Countdown and Digital Man are my personal 2 favourites. I love the reggae vibe on Digital Man, sort of progressive reggae, I guess you could call it. Losing It is absolutely beautiful, and that electric violin comes in. I'd say this was the last of Rush's albums that were masterpieces. I'd say from 1975 to 1982 was their absolute best era, and this was the last of that. Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, they're all really, really good, but this was their last album until Clockwork Angels that was an absolute masterpiece. Chemistry, again, every single song on it's absolutely brilliant. I can't really say much more about it. It's such a good album, and every time I listen to it, every song on it sounds different as well. They're all very synthy. It's a very synthy album, and you could sort of hear that building up on Moving Pictures, the album previously before it. But such a good album. Okay, number 5. We've gone on for a while now. Need to wrap this up. Number 5, Caress of Steel. This is usually considered one of the worst Rush albums ever, and I think it's one of their absolute best. Probably the single most underrated prog rock album ever, and I think I actually put that at number 1 on my underrated prog rock albums list. Personally, I think the album literally gets better as it goes along. The worst song on it's Bastille Day, and the best song on it's Fountain of Lamneth. I'd say Fountain of Lamneth is their best side-long epic. The Necromancers are also a fantastic 12-minute epic, and Lakeside Park has such beautiful atmospherics on it. I really like the atmospherics. That's probably one of my favourite things in the album. And the Fountain of Lamneth is just so beautiful. I think it's so much more beautiful than 2112, and nobody gives it enough credit. Any Rush fans that really don't like this album, please just give it another listen and try and find the good things in it, because it is there. It really, really is. It's a really, really good album that didn't get anywhere near as much love as it deserved when it came out, and it actually almost completely ruined Rush's career, and I think that's so unfair. I think the album is an absolute masterpiece. I think it's so beautiful. It's one of the best albums ever, but not quite the best Rush album. Okay, number 4. Now, this is usually like the top 4 of most people's favourite Rush albums, and I'm not trying to be generic or anything. It's just that most Rush fans are right when they say number 4, Hemispheres. And any Rush fans that know, this is how good this album is. Cygnus X1 Book 2, it's complex, the lyrics are trippy as hell, it's got such a trippy concept. Circumstances is probably my least favourite song on the album, but that's very good as well. The Trees has such a brilliant bass line during the sort of bridge. And then La Via Strangiato is easily probably my favourite instrumental of all time. Very complex, very, very good. And La Via Strangiato actually took longer to record than Fly By Night did, the whole album. So this is the sort of the album that broke the camel's back in a way. This was where Rush sort of they realised they were actually spending too much time being complex and making music. They had to take a bit of a break. But as a prog album, it's absolutely fantastic. Hey, number 3, Farewell to Kings, 1977. The album previous to Hemispheres. This, if I could just sum up how good this album is in one word, Xanadu. Xanadu is like one of the absolute greatest songs ever made, in my opinion. It may be the best Rush song. It's not my personal favourite, but if all Rush fans voted and this was ranked at number 1, I wouldn't argue. It's that song alone is worth the price of the album. But then you've got the title track, which is also brilliant. Closer to the Heart's one of the Rush's best singles. Cinderella Man's a kind of the forgotten one of the album, but still very good. And Madrigal is very beautiful as well. Cygnus X1, Book 1. I prefer Book 2. I think most fans do, but Book 1's also very good. And you can sort of hear the progressive metal sounds right at the end. It's very... Geddy Lee's voice goes really high, like really, really high at the end of that song. And I used to find that a bit... but actually, I think it's just badass now. But, like, again, Xanadu. I don't need to say anything else, just Xanadu. There you go. Number 2, Permanent Waves. I mean, again, this is another one that's just brilliant from start to finish. The Spirit of Radio is one of the best singles ever. It's complex and it's got such a great guitar line, but it's also a single. So there you go. Free Will, again, one of the absolute greatest guitar solos. Jacob's Ladder, I guess you could say, is one of the proggiest songs on the album. And Entre Nous and Different Strings, I'd say the weakest two. But Different Strings is the best of those two, I'd say. Entre Nous is probably my personal least favourite of the album. And Natural Science is one of the best Rush songs ever. Easily the best on the album. Very complex. And I especially like to listen to it if I'm walking along a sort of a beach or a seaside town and it's raining and the waves are crashing on me. Anyone who has an iPod or an MP3 player, listen to this. I suggest you listen to this song on a rainy day, walking past the waves as it crashes on you. Sorry, Facebook notifications. But I remember the first time I listened to it, and it's like with most Rush albums, it's just those memories, and it's absolutely fantastic. One of the best albums ever made, and my personal second favourite Rush album. And number 1, most Rush fans probably agree, Moving Pictures. It's one. I reviewed it last year. It's one of those albums that it's just difficult to describe how good it is. I mean, Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, YYZ, Limelight. That's side 1, and that album, that enough makes it one of the greatest albums ever. But then you've got the Camera Eye, which is my personal all-time favourite Rush song. I can't even describe how good that is. Then you've got Witch Hunt, which is emotional and dark and eerie, and then Vital Signs has a sort of slightly reggae feel to it that a lot of people really, really like. Personally, it's my least favourite on the album, but it's brilliant from start to finish. It doesn't let up at all, and you know, like I said, side 1's fantastic, but then the Camera Eye hits and it's like, whoa. So Moving Pictures easily number 1, I'd say. It's absolutely brilliant, and most Rush fans agree it is probably their best album. It's sort of like the perfect sort of peak of their albums. You've sort of got the really proggy stuff of the 80s and the sort of more synthy stuff proggy stuff of the 70s, sorry, and the more synthy stuff of the 80s sort of in one, and it's just the perfect blend. You know, Permanent Waves backwards was a more proggy, Signals onwards is more sort of synthy, so it's the perfect blend of the two, and it's just the perfect Rush album, I'd say. Moving Pictures, absolutely brilliant. I did not intend for this video to go on for half an hour, I'm sorry. It is 19 albums, and I don't want to just quickly rush through them. So I hope it wasn't too long, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. if I'm going to do another albums rank video, I might do Van der Graaf Generator next, but I doubt I'll do a rank video as my next video. I'll probably do a review next. But anyway, thanks for watching. See you later.